Captain Alan Wright of the United Earth Defense Force stood silently as the Zithari soldiers laughed. Their scaled skin moved with their amusement, and their jaw parts clicked in what humans knew was their kind of laughter. The peace meeting was meant to make the alliance between humans and the lizard-like Zithari official against the bug-like Vres collective, but it had turned into this awkward scene. And your people really believed that one man could beat thousands in battle? Commander Scathar clicked, his translator making his words sound like perfect English, with basic blades and no outer shell upgrades. The room, full of both human and Zithari officials and military staff, now looked at the big screen showing old human art of Hercules fighting armies of monsters, of Samson destroying the temple, of Beowulf killing Grendel. These are old myths, explained Dr. Olivia Martinez, the human culture expert. They had important roles in early human groups. But they are clearly false, cut in Lieutenant Zexnar, a younger Zithari officer. No thinking species could possibly believe that a single living being could do such things. Our history records go back 17,000 years and have no such silly stories. Alan kept his face calm, though his hand touched the metal on his chest, the Cross of Valor given after the Battle of Proxima Centauri. The Zithari noticed everything. Best not to show they upset him by mocking human culture. The Zithari grew up with outer logic systems, whispered communications specialist Susan Miller, who stood beside Alan. They don't understand our way of using symbols or big talk. Yet they seem to have learned how to look down on others quite well, Alan replied quietly. Commander Scathar turned to look at another display. And this one? A big wooden horse used to hide warriors? No smart defender would fail to check such an obvious trick. The Trojan horse shows smart thinking, not real history, Dr. Martinez explained patiently. Strange, Scathar replied, his jaw parts moving in what the humans had learned was doubt. Your species' history records mix real and made up so freely. It makes your documents very unreliable. Alan watched as the human group grew more uncomfortable. This alliance was vital for Earth to survive against the Vres collective, who had already eaten 3 worlds with people on them. They needed the Zithari's advanced weapons and their knowledge of Vres weak points. He caught the eye of General Patricia Nelson, who gave him a small nod. The message was clear. Put up with the culture mocking for the greater good. But Alan's thoughts went to the Battle of Proxima Centauri, to what he had done there, to what he had become. The Zithari records had nothing about those events. Their scouts had arrived after the battle ended, finding only the aftermath, a human win that had saved the colony. What would these mocking warriors think if they knew the truth? The next day, Alan found himself in a meeting room with several Zithari officials. They were going over battle plans for joint operations against the Vres. Your tactics rely too much on individual heroism, said Commander Scathar, pointing at the human battle plans. Just like your myths. One soldier cannot hold a position against hundreds of Vres drones. Alan looked at the battle map. Sometimes one person in the right place can make all the difference. A very human view, Scathar replied. The Zithari prefer reliable group tactics based on proven science, not wishful thinking. Lieutenant Zexnar had been quiet, but now he spoke up. I have been studying human battle reports. There is mention of something unusual at Proxima Centauri. His compound eyes turned to Alan. A single human soldier held a mountain pass for almost a full day against waves of Vres attackers. The reports say over 200 Vres died. The room went quiet. Military reports often get details wrong in the heat of battle, Alan said carefully. Perhaps, Zexnar continued, but I notice you wear the Cross of Valor. That is your highest award for battle bravery, yes? And you were at Proxima Centauri. General Nelson stepped in. Some details of that battle remain classified. Of course, Scathar said. Military secrets are to be expected, but if humans have weapons or skills we do not know about, should allies not share such things? All relevant tactical information has been shared, General Nelson replied firmly. Alan felt the Zithari's eyes on him. They were logical beings. They noticed patterns. They asked questions, and they would keep asking until they got answers. That evening, Alan stood alone on the observation deck of the ship. looking out at the stars. Earth was just a blue dot from here, barely visible. Worth protecting, worth any price. "Captain Wright," came a voice behind him. It was Lieutenant Zexnar. "Lieutenant," Alan acknowledged with a nod. "Come to enjoy the view?" "I came to ask you a direct question," the alien said. "My species values clear communication." "Ask then." "Were you the soldier at Proxima Centauri? The one who held Newton Pass?" Alan was silent for a long moment. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because, if the reports are even half true, you did something that should be physically impossible for a human," Zexnar said. "And if one impossible thing is true, perhaps others are as well." "Like our myths?" Alan asked with a small smile. "Precisely. Today, Commander Scathar mocked your Hercules for feats no being could perform. But what if your ancestors saw something like what happened at Proxima Centauri? What if they tried to explain it the best way they could?" Alan turned back to the stars. "An interesting theory." "The Vress will attack again soon," Zexnar said. "They always do. When that happens, we may need more than standard tactics to survive." "When that happens," Alan replied, "you'll see what humans are truly capable of." As Zexnar left, Alan's hand again touched the metal on his chest. Beneath it, under his uniform, faint blue lines glowed softly on his skin. The secret he carried might soon need to come to light. The Alliance might depend on it, and when it did, the Zithari would learn that some myths had more truth to them than anyone suspected. 2 days later, Alan found himself in the officers' eating area aboard the UES Sentinel, the main human ship hosting the joint military planning meetings. The ship made a soft humming sound from its engines as it circled Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon where the final agreement would be signed. "Captain Wright?" A voice broke into his thoughts. It was Chief Medical Officer Diane Foster, putting her food tray down across from him. "Can I sit with you?" "Please," Alan waved at the seat. "You have been quiet since the culture meeting," she said, looking at him with professional interest. "The Zithari can be harsh." Alan shrugged. "They are practical beings. They like facts and proof. I can respect that." "But?" Diane pushed. "But there is more to being human than what can be measured or written down," he finished. Their talk was cut short as a group of Zithari officers entered the eating area. The aliens moved with exact, careful steps, their outer shells shining under the lights. Among them was Lieutenant Zexnar, who had been very vocal about human, made-up stories. The young Zithari officer saw Alan, and after a moment's pause, walked toward their table. "Captain Wright," Zexnar's translator turned, his clicks into words. "May I join you and the doctor?" "Of course." Alan pointed to an empty chair. Zexnar sat, his movements careful. "I want to ask about something. My research into human war history mentions your name at the Battle of Proxima Centauri, yet the details are very vague." Alan's jaw got tight slightly. "Secret information, Lieutenant." "I understand," Zexnar replied. "Yet rumors continue among the human crew. They say one human soldier held back the Vress alone for 17 standard hours at Newton Valley. That a single human killed over 200 Vress warriors." His jaw parts clicked quickly. "Obviously another of your colorful exaggerations." Diane's eyes moved to Alan, then back to her food. "Why would you think that?" Alan asked carefully. "Because it goes against known reality," Zexnar stated. "Our scientific understanding of human bodies shows that such a feat would be impossible. Your species lacks the hard outer shell, natural weapons, or healing abilities needed for such fighting success." Alan took a slow sip of his coffee. "Sometimes reality surprises us. I heard quiet talk," Zexnar continued, leaning forward, "that the human who did these impossible feats was you, Captain Wright." "The battle reports are secret," Alan repeated. "Yet your crew speaks of you with the same respect as your old myths speak of Achilles or this Hercules," Zexnar pushed. "They say you moved faster than human limits allow, that you kept fighting despite injuries that should have killed you." The eating area seemed suddenly quieter, as if the air itself was listening. "Lieutenant," Diane cut in, "some topics are sensitive. We need to trust each other if this alliance is to work," Zexnar argued. "How can we trust what we don't understand? If humans truly have abilities beyond our scientific understanding, should the Zithari High Command not know?" Alan stood up quickly. "Excuse me, Lieutenant Doctor. I have duties to attend to." As he left the eating area, he could feel the eyes of both humans and Zithari following him. The quiet talk had begun, and it would only grow louder. Later that day, Alan was called to General Nelson's office. She was not alone. Commander Scathar was with her, his tall form standing rigid by the window. "Captain," General Nelson nodded, "Commander Scathar has some concerns about our alliance. I have been reviewing all available data on the Battle of Proxima Centauri," Scathar said without greeting. "The numbers do not add up. The human victory defies logical explanation." Alan kept his face neutral. "War is often chaotic." "Not to this degree," Scathar insisted. "Our analysis suggests that either your reports contain major errors, or there are factors you have not shared with us." His compound eyes fixed on Alan. "Lieutenant Zexnar tells me you refuse to discuss your role in the battle." "That's enough." "Commander," General Nelson said firmly, "Captain Wright follows my orders regarding classified information." "And does that classified information include weapons or abilities that violate our agreement?" Scathar asked. "The treaty requires full disclosure of military capabilities." Alan felt a flash of anger. "We have shared everything relevant to our joint operations." "Have you?" Scathar's jaw parts clicked, and what Alan had learned was the Zithari expression of doubt. "Then perhaps you would not mind a medical examination by our science team. Standard procedure for all joint mission commanders." General Nelson stepped between them. "That won't be necessary, Commander. Captain Wright has passed all required human medical exams." "But not Zithari ones," Scathar pressed. "Our scanners might detect things yours miss." Alan met the alien's gaze. "What exactly are you looking for, Commander?" "Anything that might explain how one human soldier could defeat hundreds of Vress warriors," Scathar replied. "Anything that might prove your myths are not as fictional as they appear." The room fell silent. The tension between them was like a physical thing. Finally, General Nelson spoke. "Captain Wright is not available for additional testing. If the Zithari High Command wishes to formally request a review of our classified battle records, they may do so through proper channels." Scathar's jaw parts clicked rapidly, but he nodded. "Very well, we will do so." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Captain Wright, my people value truth above all else. Whatever secrets you hide, remember that lies between allies lead to disaster." After the door closed, General Nelson sighed. "They're getting too close, Alan." "It was bound to happen," he replied. "The Zithari are too observant, too logical. They see the gaps in our stories." "Project Prometheus must remain classified," she insisted. "If the public found out what we did to soldiers like you, if the Vress attack again, we may not have a choice," Alan interrupted. "We need this alliance, General, and for it to work, they need to know what they're really allying with." "General?" Nelson looked at him for a long moment. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." But as Alan left her office, the alarm system began to sound. Red lights flashed in the corridors. "All personnel to battle stations," came the ship-wide announcement. "This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to battle stations." Vress ships detected entering the system. Alan felt a cold certainty settle over him. The time for secrets was over. The alarm sounds woke Alan from a light sleep. He was fully dressed and running toward the bridge before the ship-wide announcement finished. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to battle stations." The bridge was busy but controlled when he arrived. General Nelson stood at the command station, her face grim. "Captain Wright, report to tactical," she ordered right away. The main screen showed the situation clearly. 3 Vress hive ships had appeared from faster-than-light travel near Europa's orbit. Somehow they had found the location of the peace meeting. "They should not have been able to track us here," said Commander Elijah Brown, the Sentinel's captain. Our stealth systems were fully on. They must have a spy, said Commander Scathar, who spoke for the Zithari group on the bridge. Perhaps among your crew, humans. Alan ignored the blame as he looked at the tactical display. The Europa base is moving civilians to the underground shelters, but they will not all make it in time. The Vres will reach drop range in 17 minutes. General Nelson's face darkened. The Zithari ships are moving to stop them, but they will only slow the Vres down. We need to buy more time for the evacuation. The Sentinel could position itself between the base and the incoming Vres, Alan suggested. Our shields are stronger. And sacrifice our main ship? Unacceptable, Scathar clicked. We should focus on protecting the Zithari diplomatic vessel. It carries our senior leaders. The tension on the bridge grew thicker. With respect, Commander, Alan said. There are 20,000 civilians on Europa, including children. Sad, but strategic needs must come first, Scathar replied coolly. The Alliance cannot survive the loss of our leadership. General Nelson stepped between them. We are not sacrificing civilians or leadership. Captain Wright, what other options do we have? Alan studied the tactical display, mind racing through options. We could send a shuttle to draw their attention. The Vres prefer targeting small craft. They consider them easier prey. A suicide mission, Scathar noted. Who would volunteer? I would, Alan said without pause. The bridge fell silent. Out of the question, General Nelson replied. You are too valuable to this operation, Captain. With respect, General, I am the logical choice. I have survived Vres attacks before. At Proxima Centauri, Lieutenant Zexnar said, having just entered the bridge, where you supposedly did impossible things. All eyes turned to Alan. This is not the time, Lieutenant, General Nelson warned. On the contrary, Zexnar continued, if Captain Wright has abilities beyond normal human limits, as rumors suggest, then he might indeed survive such a mission. The bridge fell silent. Again. But now the silence felt different, expecting, curious, hopeful. General Nelson looked at Alan, her face unreadable. Captain, my ready room. Now. Once the door closed behind them, she turned to him. It is time, is it not? Alan nodded slowly. They need to know what they are really joining with. The project was kept secret for a reason, Alan, she said quietly. If the public found out what we did to volunteers like you. If I do not do this, thousands die today and the Alliance probably breaks apart, Alan replied. And then millions more will die when the Vres come for Earth. General Nelson stared at him for a long moment before nodding. Do what you need to do. I will handle the fallout. When they returned to the bridge, her voice was steady. Captain Wright will lead a diversion mission in Shuttlecraft Alpha. Prepare it for immediate launch. As Alan turned to leave, Commander Scathar stepped forward. I will go with Captain Wright. If he truly has the abilities people whisper about, I wish to see firsthand. Absolutely not, General Nelson began. I volunteer as well, Lieutenant Zexnar added. Alan met their compound eyes. This is not a science trip, gentlemen. It is likely a one-way trip. All the more reason to verify these human myths directly, Scathar replied. If they prove true, the Zithari High Command will want first-hand testimony. Alan looked to General Nelson, who gave a resigned nod. 10 minutes to launch, Alan said. Meet me in Shuttle Bay 3. The next 10 minutes passed in a blur. Alan collected his special gear from his quarters, a form-fitting black undersuit lined with faint blue patterns. He sealed it into a secure case and headed to the shuttle bay. Commander Scathar and Lieutenant Zexnar were waiting for him, both in full Zithari battle armor. Their exoskeletons gleamed with weapon attachments and life support systems. I am pleased you came prepared, Scathar noted, looking at Alan's standard human uniform with no visible protection. Though your own armor seems lacking, I have what I need, Alan replied simply, stowing the secure case in the shuttle's rear compartment. The shuttle launch was smooth and fast. Captain Brown had given them priority clearance, and within minutes they were clear of the Sentinel and moving toward the approaching Vress fleet. "Your plan?" Scathar asked from the co-pilot seat. "We broadcast on all frequencies. Make ourselves seem like an easy target," Alan explained, hands moving over the controls. "Vress think like hunters. They cannot resist a lone small prey." "Then, what?" Zexnar asked from behind them. "Then we lead as many as we can away from the civilian evacuation zone," Alan replied. "The longer we survive, the more people get to safety." "And how exactly do we survive against Vress attack craft?" Scathar asked. Alan looked at him. "That is where things get interesting." He activated the emergency beacon, broadcasting on all channels. Almost at once, the lead Vress ship changed course. Dozens of smaller craft broke off from its hull like angry wasps from a nest. "They have taken the bait," Alan announced. "Get ready for contact." Scathar's jaw parts clicked rapidly. "This is death. They will overwhelm us in seconds." "Not if we can reach that asteroid field." Alan pointed to a thick cluster of space rocks ahead. "We can use it for cover, lead some of them on a chase." Buying time for the evacuation, Zexnar realized. A noble death. Alan guided the shuttle toward the asteroids, but it was clear they would not reach them before the Vress fighters caught up. The first shot of bioplasma streaked past them, a warning. "Evasive action," Alan called, throwing the shuttle into a spin that would have caused blackouts without the special systems. The second volley would not miss. There were too many fighters, too many angles of attack. "It has been an honor serving with you both," Scathar said formally, his cultural training showing in what he believed were his final moments. Alan stood from the pilot's chair. "Take the controls, Commander." "What are you doing?" Zexnar demanded, as Alan moved toward the rear compartment. "What I was made to do," Alan replied, opening the secure case to reveal the black undersuit with faint blue lines. "Keep us moving toward those asteroids." "You cannot go outside," Scathar exclaimed. "The vacuum, the radiation, the Vress weapons." But Alan was already heading for the airlock, removing his uniform to reveal he was already wearing the strange suit underneath. "What I am about to show you," he said from the airlock door, "is what your people would call a myth. After today you will understand why humans tell the stories we do." With that, he cycled the airlock, stepping out into the vacuum of space without a helmet or pressure suit as the stunned Zithari officers watched through the viewports. And then, before their eyes, Alan Wright began to change. Through the viewport, Commander Scathar and Lieutenant Zexnar watched in shock as Captain Alan Wright floated in the vacuum of space. Any normal human would already be dead, their blood boiling, lungs bursting from the lack of pressure. But Alan simply hung there, his body wrapped in the black undersuit with its strange blue lines. Then the transformation began. The black material of the suit seemed to melt, flowing like liquid across his skin. It spread, thickened, and hardened into something that looked neither like human flesh nor mechanical armor, but some mix of both. The blue lines grew brighter, pulsing with energy. Where Alan's eyes had been, 2 points of bright blue light now glowed. "Impossible," whispered Zexnar. The first wave of Vress fighters reached them. Bioplasma weapons fired, streams of deadly energy racing toward the exposed human. The Zithari officers braced for the death of their human companion, but Alan moved. He shot through space under his own power, dodging the bioplasma with speed that should not have been possible. His right arm changed shape, stretching into what appeared to be a blade of pure energy. The lead Vress fighter fired again. This time the blast hit Alan directly, but instead of destroying him, the energy seemed to flow into his transformed body. The blue lines glowed even brighter. Then he reached the fighter and cut through its hull as if it were paper. "What manner of technology is this?" Scathar demanded, though no one could answer him. Alan moved from one Vress fighter to another. He changed shapes as needed, sometimes growing shields to block attacks, sometimes forming weapons to strike back. Where bioplasma hit him, his body absorbed the energy, growing stronger. "The myths," Scathar said quietly. "The human myths." They were not myths, Zexnar realized. They were records, imperfect, symbolic records of beings like him. More Vress fighters broke off from the main group, turning their attention to the lone human and away from the evacuation ships. It was working. The diversion was saving lives. "We must reach those asteroids," Scathar said, taking control of the shuttle. "From there we can observe and record this. The High Command must see." As they flew toward the asteroid field, they continued to watch the battle behind them. One human, or something that had once been human, against dozens of Vress fighters, and he was winning. Inside the control room of the Europa base, General Nelson watched the tactical displays with growing hope. "The Vress fighters are breaking formation," reported Communications Officer Susan Miller. "Over 60% are pursuing a single target away from the evacuation zone." "Captain Wright," General Nelson said quietly. "Ma'am?" "Nothing." She turned to the base commander. "How long until the civilians are safe?" 20 more minutes to get everyone into the deep shelters," he replied. "Then we need to give them 20 minutes. She opened a channel to the Sentinel. "Captain Brown, prepare. To engage the Vress cruisers, we need to keep them busy." As the human forces moved to confront the main Vress ships, General Nelson watched the small dot on her display that represented Alan. It moved with impossible speed, drawing more and more Vress fighters away from the civilians. She thought back to the day she had recruited him for Project Prometheus. He had been badly wounded in an earlier battle, given less than a 10% chance to survive. The experimental procedure would either save him or kill him faster. He had agreed without hesitation. "For Earth," he had said. Now she watched as that sacrifice bore fruit. Once again, Alan Wright was placing himself between humanity and extinction. "The Zithari cruisers are moving to support us," Miller reported with surprise. "It seems our allies have decided to fight after all," General Nelson replied. But she suspected she knew why. The Zithari commanders must have received reports from Scathar and Zexnar. They now knew the humans had technology or abilities beyond anything they had guessed. The battle raged across the Jupiter system. The Vress pressed their attack, but the combined human and Zithari forces held them back, while the lone figure of Captain Wright continued to draw away fighter after fighter. Inside the shuttle, now safely hidden among the asteroids, Scathar and Zexnar watched through special long-range viewers. "The energy readings are off any scale I have seen," Zexnar reported, studying his instruments. "His body appears to be converting the Vress bioplasma into usable power. Technology beyond even Zithari science," Scathar noted. "Perhaps not technology at all," Zexnar suggested. "At least not as we understand it. Look at how it moves with his thoughts, changes with his needs. It is more like an extension of his body than a tool or weapon." They watched as Alan tore through another fighter, his form briefly changing to slip through a gap in its hull before reforming inside and destroying it from within. "Hercules," Scathar said quietly. "Samson, Beowulf, one warrior against many monsters. We mocked these stories as primitive myths. Because such things should be impossible," Zexnar agreed. "Yet we are watching the impossible happen before our eyes." A massive explosion lit up space as one of the Vress cruisers was destroyed by the combined firepower of human and Zithari ships. The remaining Vress began to pull back, their fighters returning to the protection of their motherships. "They are retreating," Scathar observed. But what of Captain Wright? They scanned the area where they had last seen him, surrounded by Vress fighters. There was nothing but debris now. Could he have survived? Zexnar wondered. A soft thump on the hull answered his question. Both Zithari officers turned as the airlock began to cycle. Moments later, Alan Wright stepped through, once again wearing only his black undersuit with its faintly glowing blue lines. He looked tired, but unharmed. "How?" Scathar began, but found he had no words to continue. "A long story," Alan replied, collapsing into the pilot's seat. "One that goes back further than even I know." "The energy readings I took," Zexnar said. "They match patterns found in ancient artifacts discovered throughout Zithari space. Artifacts we could never activate or understand." Alan looked up with surprise. "You have found other pieces of this technology?" "If it is technology at all," Scathar said. "What are you, Captain Wright?" What has your species become? Alan looked down at his hands. Normal human hands now, though the faint blue line still pulsed beneath the black material covering his arms. That, he said quietly, is what we need to discuss with both our leaders, because I think the Vress know more about what I am than I do, and I think that's why they fear us. 3 days later, Alan stood before the combined Zithari and Human Leadership Council. The Battle of Europa, as people already called it, had ended in victory. The Vress had retreated after losing one of their ships and many fighters. The peace talks would continue, but first there was the matter of what had been revealed. Captain Wright, began the Zithari High Commander Tazkor, or perhaps that title is no longer correct. What exactly are you? The room was quiet, filled with the top leaders of both species. General Nelson stood supportively at Alan's side, while Commander Scathar and Lieutenant Zexnar sat among the Zithari group, still processing what they had seen. I am human, Alan replied simply. Enhanced, but human. Project Prometheus, General Nelson explained. A secret program developed after our first battles with the Vress showed how outmatched we were. We needed soldiers who could match their abilities. By turning humans into... What? Tazkor demanded. Techno-organic hybrids, Alan answered. My body contains billions of tiny machines that can change themselves and my biological tissue at will. They can convert energy, create weapons, repair damage, even work in vacuum. How many, like you, exist? Asked Tazkor. 12, General Nelson answered. All volunteers, all decorated soldiers who were badly wounded in earlier battles. The process saved their lives, but changed them. Lieutenant Zexnar leaned forward. The human myths, Hercules, Samson, Beowulf, they were not myths at all, were they? Alan smiled slightly. That is a more complicated question. Were there enhanced humans in ancient times? We do not know. But what those stories represent, the human ability to go beyond our natural limits, that is very real. Commander Scathar's jaw parts clicked thoughtfully. I saw Captain Wright absorb energy that should have burned him to nothing. I saw him move through space without engines. I saw him change his physical form at will. He turned to the Zithari leadership. These abilities go beyond even our most advanced battle suits. Why keep this secret from your allies? Tazkor demanded of General Nelson. Would you have believed us without proof? She countered. You mocked our ancient stories as impossible fantasies. How would you have reacted if we told you we had created living versions of those myths? The Zithari leaders talked among themselves, their jaw parts clicking rapidly in their native language that could not be translated. Finally, Tazkor addressed the human group. We owe you an apology, humans. We mistook your cultural symbols for scientific ignorance. We dismissed your stories as primitive thinking. We failed to understand that your species' greatest strength is not technology, but imagination. The ability to envision what does not yet exist and then create it. He turned to Alan. Captain Wright, you and your fellow enhanced humans represent a capability that could turn the tide against the Vress. Combined with Zithari technology, we may finally have a chance at victory. Alan nodded. That was always our hope. There is more, Lieutenant Zexnar added unexpectedly. During the battle, I analyzed the energy signatures coming from Captain Wright's transformed state. They match patterns found in ancient artifacts. Our archaeologists have discovered on worlds throughout our territory, artifacts we have never been able to activate or understand. The room erupted in excited clicks and human murmurs. Are you suggesting, General Nelson asked, that someone created enhanced beings like our Prometheus soldiers in the distant past? I am suggesting, Zexnar replied, that perhaps the greatest myth of all is that your enhancement technology is new. Perhaps humans and Zithari once fought together long ago, against enemies we have since forgotten. Alan looked down at his hands, ordinary human hands that hid extraordinary capabilities. Throughout human history, stories had been told of individuals who went beyond normal human limits. Were they all just stories? Or were they imperfect memories of real events preserved through cultural symbols? Whether myth or history, Alan said, addressing both human and Zithari leaders, What matters is what we do now. The Vres are still coming. Will we stand together? Commander, Scathar stood and faced Alan. The Zithari once prided ourselves on our perfect historical records, on our unwavering devotion to observable fact. But we have learned that there is wisdom in your human myths. They preserve truths that go beyond literal accuracy. He extended his hand in the human gesture of partnership that he had learned. We stand with humanity, not despite your myths, but because of them, and because of the truth they contained all along. Alan took the alien's hand, sealing an alliance that would change the course of galactic history. In the days that followed, human scientists worked with Zithari archaeologists, studying the ancient artifacts that matched the energy signatures of the Prometheus technology. They discovered many such artifacts scattered across dozens of worlds, some over 50,000 years old. There are gaps in even Zithari historical records, Zexnar explained to Alan as they examined a small device that pulsed with the same blue energy that flowed through Alan's enhanced body. Periods where civilizations seemed to simply vanish, with little explanation. The Vres? Alan suggested. Perhaps, or something worse. Something that required beings like you to fight. The research revealed images on some artifacts worn by time but still visible. Bipedal figures surrounded by energy fields, fighting against dark shapes that looked disturbingly similar to the Vres. History repeats itself, Zexnar observed. Or, perhaps, Alan replied, this war never truly ended. On Earth, the 12 Prometheus soldiers were finally revealed to the public. After initial shock and debate, they were accepted not as monsters or myths come to life, but as the next step in humanity's long journey. Heroes for a new age, yet connected to the heroes of legend. The Zithari, too, changed their view of humanity. Where once they had seen a primitive species with illogical beliefs, they now saw potential allies whose creative imagination might be the key to survival. As for Alan, he found a strange peace in the revelation. The burden of secrecy was lifted. He was neither entirely human nor entirely machine, but something new, a bridge between myth and reality. The Vres will return, General Nelson told him as they watched the combined human and Zithari fleet conduct joint exercises. They fear what you represent. Good, Alan replied. Fear is a start. But by the time we're done, they'll learn what humans have always known. And what is that? He smiled as the blue energy pulsed faintly beneath his skin. That myths have power, and sometimes they come true.